box jump, it seems like such an aggressive, I mean, I'm seeing people on a more one end of a spectrum, and if I was working more with athletes who are sort of a little bit more sometimes indestructible than, or have a little more, or even like in a different age range generally than a lot of the people that I'm working with, maybe I would see it differently.
Hello, and welcome to Peach Pit Fitness Podcast, a part of the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast network. My name is Jennifer Schwartz. I am the creator of the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast network, and today, myself and my co-host, Meredith Mack, will dive into a very trendy buzzword in the fitness industry and share our thoughts on the classics of 90s fitness. Today, we are all about the big box. We are going to be talking about box jumps and then something really fun from the 90s, which is step aerobics. And, box jumps are pretty simple and straightforward. However, we take this conversation down the rabbit hole. If you love mechanics and research and what we would say is like classic exercise science, then this episode is for you. If you have been told to do box jumps and you're not sure why, this is a great episode for you as well. Or if you are just a exercise science nerd like Meredith and I, don't be ashamed about it. Join us for this amazing conversation. We truly aim to be your guides in a new commentary on how fitness shapes our lives with our knowledge of and experience in exercise mechanics, strength training for women, anatomy, injury, and how the body adapts. Be sure to subscribe to the Think Fit, Be Fit feed so that you don't miss these episodes and the opportunity to enjoy exercise beyond a superficial level. Hello, good morning, Meredith.
Good morning, Jennifer. Jean Shorts, how are you?
I know.
Couldn't resist that one.
It's good. I used to not think it was funny. Now I love it because it's funny.
I think it's cute.
All right, Peach Pit friends, we left you, I hope, with a lot of good questions about your exercise and how to look at the frog pump with a critical eye, something that could help you with essentially any exercise. And that's our, biggest hope for this podcast. Let's say we can use this in just all different kinds of modalities and different trends and, how to break down different machines and equipment. So we're going to take a jump over to something that
I like what you did there.
It's like, let's move over to, something that is more explosive, whereas the frog pump, it's very stationary and you're moving potentially one area of the body. And now we're going to move the whole entire body and look at something called box jumps. Yes. So do you have anything to add about our last episode, Meredith?
I really enjoyed the conversation we had, and I really enjoyed going back and listening to it again. I just think it's so interesting to have an opportunity in a space like this to really break things down and to try and get more clarity. Even as somebody who works out regularly and trains people and thinks about things this way, it's still really helpful to me to really sit back and like look at something that I haven't had a lot of experience with. Like I hadn't really done much with the frog pump before, and just to look at it like from an objective standpoint, not to judge it or so much, maybe a little bit, but to try to look at it objectively. And is there a place where I would use this? Why? And if not, to say that too.
Yeah. And, I'd like to say, I'm proud of us for like walking the talk because, we do have our own opinions about exercises, and we're encouraging people to have their own opinions.
Yes.
But we're challenging ourselves with exercises that we don't normally see in our week-to-week programming or programs. And it's how, I had to go back to some textbooks that are, that I claim to be, very foundational to how I think, but how am I, if I'm not exercising that skill, then,
right.
What am I doing except, just using my microphone for, for fun. Anyways. So, all right. Yes, I agree. Good job. So we have the box jump today, and, every, session that we do here with Peach Pump, we're going to start with what is the nature of this exercise. And for this one, we couldn't really go back to a single person using it a lot today because it's seen in CrossFit, athletic training. We see it in the, body composition training. Of course, boot camps, right? Where I
very
think
ubiquitous.
Yeah. Yeah. It's used in all kinds of places. So that is another difference from this time to last. So when I think about this exercise, we both kind of had the same idea. We went back to a text called Super Training, and that was originally written by Yuri Verchansky. I can't
Verkhoshansky, something like that. I don't know.
And someone else, I can't remember.
Melsif.
Yes, Melsif, yeah, an easy one. So, but I did pull the text that I have from Verkhoshansky. His daughter has picked up his work.
Okay.
And I think that is just super cool.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And okay, so the nature of this, I said it depends on who you ask. Wait,
right.
Right. Go ahead.
One of the main things about this topic is, and in doing some research, and you had mentioned a YouTube video that you had watched with Dr. Yesus, who I really came to enjoy. But really differentiating between, and I'm sure you're about to get into this, but like the difference between what the intention was. And it's not like we haven't all been doing, with running, that's a ballistic movement. That's a form, you could say, of like plyometrics. But really separating out what Verkhoshansky was trying to accomplish versus what the exercise world has kind of like taken and used in many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. So, so from a classical science perspective, the nature of this exercise is not necessary jump training, not explosive power training, but it's more about force absorption. So I guess we'll back up and say the visual of a box jump is you jump onto a box, bringing both knees up. Some people can get full hip extension. Other people aren't. They're just going to kind of hop up there. And full hip extension meaning standing, right? Yeah. If we had to, so you can imagine, just hopping up onto the box and landing with both feet on the box. And
like knees bent, kind of like already in a squat position, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can go, or it can be something as, you're go up vertically, you're almost in full hip extension, and then you land on the box. So that would be a much shorter box for
and that was one of the things that I thought was really interesting. And I didn't get like a clear, and it's a choice to make, right? If we're looking at like sort of like jump training versus like classic plyometrics, there are people who are arguing which one is correct. And what would be beneficial. I like to get into the YouTube thread sometimes and see what the comment, how people are responding to certain videos. And there was a lot of like arguing about what is really the right technique.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah. And again, back to this, like this classical view of it, is that, and we're saying classical because this guy literally wrote the book on strength and conditioning out of, Russian Olympic training. And that is kind of the birthplace of
as strength and conditioning as we know it. Not kind of, it is. And so the way they use it at first, they call it depth jumps, which actually means going down. So that's the opposite of what we're talking
about. Right.
So, not to confuse you guys, but it also means that like the perspective here is like that depth jump and jumping onto a box. Depth jump meaning you're on the box and you go down and land, and you're kind of learning force absorption and technique that way, is different than you jumping up onto a box. And so if somebody says that there's literature behind their box jump theory or their technique, they might be completely upside down about it, because what is actually mentioned in a lot of the literature is the depth jump, which is the jump down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I clarify?
I think that was such an interesting point, and like one that because I haven't really explored, to be quite honest. Like I don't work with a lot of athletes, and if I were doing something like this with a lot of my clientele, I would be sort of modifying it in certain ways. So it was really interesting to read more about the history of that and have that differentiation. And also the differentiation, which you had mentioned about like, the idea was to do like a max of like 10 reps maybe. And like what we see so much with like jump training today, especially in things like CrossFit and other workout styles, is like 100 reps, like as many reps as possible. All of these things where it's really taxing. It's more about endurance than it is about like being super specific about the technique and really having a very specific goal in mind with the intention of enhancing performance.
Yeah. That's the thing about this. Box jumps don't do squat for your strength. And, they don't do much for, I guess, strength or size or, so, that's like a whole nother thing. It's like, if you're using them as intended, which is like 10 reps with, really mindful execution and practice and rehearsed execution, then 10 reps is, it's for force absorption. And in sports, that's deceleration. And that is what carries over to sports, according to my experience and a lot of the literature that I went through. Let me see my notes. Yeah. Cause there are people on the internet claiming that box jumps and explosive movements can build strength and muscle mass. And it just doesn't.
And it's like differentiating to like what kind of strength. So if we're talking about like power, speed, maybe there are things that are, but right. Just in terms of like, there were so many claims as to what box jumps do, everything from just, burning calories, burning fat, increasing muscle size, all different kinds of, but it could and I would be curious, from your background as a soccer player, was this a part of plyometrics? Must have been in agility drills and a part of your training?
Well, not when I was younger. I don't remember back then. When I got to college, we had a traditional strength training program, and we had a curve set up, to be honest with you. In circuits around a machine.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
and we did one lift, which was a deadlift, which could make sense for soccer players because the hamstrings are, constantly under tension from changing direction, basically. And but in my time as like a program director, so for those of you that don't know, I ran and developed my own strength and injury prevention program that served, in one season, like 400 kids, like athletes.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. 8th grade through high school.
Okay.
And, they're competitive. They're training, 3-4 times a week. They're competing all weekend, traveling, the whole thing. And, and then during that time, there was a surveillance study that came out. This is my big claim to fame, guys. So there was a surveillance study that came out on athletic trainers. And it said for every oh gosh, I think it was like 11 and a half hours of training total in the school. There was one ACL tear, like
Oh, wow.
all the kids. Like, so, the numbers still ended up being like 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 of these kids in high school will tear an ACL, whether you're male or female.
Yeah.
And the rate at the club that my program was under, we were well under that.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. So, and it's all documented, and it's, so depth jumps were a part of that. Box jumps were never a part of that training. And the reason I know this literature is because, I've had to present my thought process to my peers, right? So in order to do that, I have had to look at the literature, or that's my standard. And I didn't have to do anything. I just had, I had the job.
Right.
And, and throughout many Instagram accounts for soccer players training and learning how to train themselves, it's all over the place. They love box jumps. They love unstable jumps. They love, the Bosu kind of jumps. They love single leg jumps. And, we did single leg work, but we weren't jumping off or onto anything, if we were going up onto something, it was a step up that I taught them that had to be done in a certain way, or they didn't get to do it. And that's Coach Jen.
I love Coach Jen. Those sound like very smart principles, Coach Jen.
So, and so when we go into our critique, what's the authority on all of box jumps? I'm going to go ahead and say, because of the nature of the literature of the classical science that Vershahansky and his daughter have worked on, I'm going to say CrossFit is not an authority on this, for me.
Okay.
I think that even though they are like, let's call them the purveyors of box jumps, and, they, I'm not going to call them an authority on it, because their programming is well known to be more random than it is backed by thought process.
Okay.
I mean, so I think the authority is our super training text and the work that has come out of that. In fact, if I were looking at professionally, if I were looking at any strength and conditioning book and that didn't reference this era of work, I would have very serious doubts as to what they were basing their stuff off of. So so that's who my authority is on this. Oh,
love it.
On the back.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I don't have that. I have a different edition.
This is Special Strength Training Manual for Coaches.
Oh, okay. Different.
So I'll read his bio real quick. It's right here. Vershahansky is one of the greatest experts in the theory of sports training, whose ideas was implemented and expanded as methodology of special strength training and special physical preparation, long delay training effect. These are his theories that he's worked with. Conjugate sequence system, which is something that is very hot right now. They don't talk about it, but in that way, and block training system. So this is periodization, this is the beginning of it. For many years, he was the head of the commission that led the Institutes of Physical Education and Sports Scientific Research for all the USSR countries as well. These institutes elaborated the training systems for the high-level athletes and allowed others to benefit from his research and findings. So then it goes on to, the National Olympic Committees he was on and things like that. But, all this is coming from his term, which is called shock method training. And that's from 1966. So I definitely could go more into like what is box jumps, as far as like, I love this, the conversations ones about force velocity. That's really cool. I love the conversations about the inside of the muscle, the stretch, cycle that is happening when we're, landing, and muscles contracting and responding. But, all in all, my conclusion is that the box jump is popular for a lot of reasons, and that the thing that matters the most when we're really critically thinking about our method, our technique, and maybe someone who's coaching us is, that are they coaching us our response at the ground, our landing? Because that's where this stuff really happens for, in the microcosm of exercise, the moment. And, that's what makes them really sought after. What do you have any conclusion
for from an athletic perspective and a training for like sports performance?
Yeah.
Because I really do think, and I was thinking about how so many things that get popularized in the fitness world are like watered down versions of an actual thing. So like yoga, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are like very, naturalists or whatever, or like very purists in, and so there's so many different variations on yoga now, right? That a lot of people might look at and be like, that's not even yoga. I think about this sort of the same way. I mean, like Zumba, right? Like it's this conglomeration of like all these different, like real people trained in these like dance techniques for years but we water it down and kind of make it fun. And like, this is fun, go do it. You'll burn calories, you'll burn fat, you'll make friends. I don't know. But that happens so much. It reminded me of like a class I took when I was living in Oklahoma that combined ballet and Pilates and yoga. And just as somebody who has taken like actual ballet classes in my life, I was disappointed because it wasn't, but why was I even expecting that it was going to be like a ballet class, it's, and so the box jump, it's like, and one of the things that the Dr. This guy was saying was that even like Verkhoshansky like didn't want it even to be called plyometrics anymore. Like he wanted to have it either be like the shock method, like you said, or and the other thing could be like jump training or plyometrics, because it was so different with the intended principles. And so like, let's just call it something else. Like, I don't really want to be associated with that. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's like,
there we go.
It's, to me, it's not right. And none of these things, again, is like, it's like, not that it doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make it wrong, but like, why are you using it? Who are you using it? So like, when it comes to CrossFit and things like that, it's like, is it just for everybody? Anybody who goes is expected to do this thing. Is it the same box height for everybody? I read in a couple of places, people were saying that the reason you jump up to a box is because you are minimizing the forces when you land on the box. So like, instead of going all the way up and coming back down with that, but then you still have to get down from the box. And how are you getting down from the box? So like, in some of the things from CrossFit that I've seen, you're just jumping right back down. So if that's, well, yeah. And like you said, how are you doing it? Is somebody there watching you and like really critiquing your technique and making sure that you're doing it properly?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the watered down thing. Is like, yeah, why would we continue to, I don't know, call it a box jump again, like on the internet, when, everybody's got a different type of motion or a different intensity of motion, and they all have the same name. And
right.
That points to another huge problem in the.
It would be cool to be able to differentiate. I was just gonna, well, this is just sort of an aside, but I just wonder too, though, like about ego.
Yeah.
And how like because I see a lot of like things as it relates to box jumps in terms of like, how high can I jump? What, and stacking some massive thing that looks really impressive, right? If it's like a TikTok or an Instagram reel or whatever it is. And so, like, sometimes I think that we like to see those things because they're fascinating, but it's like almost like I just wonder how much sometimes that plays into our exercise choices.
Yeah, this is a very good platform to kind of see that from. I think the ego says, oh, we have to be athletic, or we have to, reach this certain depth or height. And that, what is that doing for us? What is the training benefit for just saying you're athletic when you also sprained your finger coming off the box? You know what I mean? And yeah, so I don't know what's that going to give us in the end.
Yeah. And it's not to say like anything other than to say that I think that that's also a consideration for like asking yourself, like, why am I doing this? Am I just doing it to prove that I can? Am I doing it to like be the highest box jumper in the world? And like for CrossFit, right, there are medals for that. They have like competitions.
True.
So
yeah, I mean, this could go in so many.
I know, I'm sorry. My brain's like,
well, that's what this is for, is the conversations about exercise don't happen with on Instagram, where I'm, looking at this girl's glutes and I'm like, oh, wow, look at that attachment point. That's really cool. These conversations aren't happening as to why she's, showing us her XYZ high intensity exercise routine. So your mind is absolutely welcome to pitter patter and wander.
I love that. Thank you for that freedom. Thank you for that license to pitter patter.
And it's, yeah, because those conversations just aren't happening. And that's why, as you've pointed out, like people choose the exercise based on, I want to look like that person. Right. Or that person might look like they know what they're doing, but the key term here is look like.
Right.
And not think if.
Yeah.
And that's what this is for. Right. So with that, I think I've got this little cheat sheet of biometrics. And so it's broken down it's like a table. So we have the quality, the intensive, and it's like the, it says extensive, but I don't know what he means by that. I'm going to just put, and I'm not going to work with that. So what makes sense is the quality, meaning what is emphasized the most in the exercise, and then the intensive, which is essentially like a purpose in a way.
Okay.
So we have the qualities being ground contact time. These are the things that would actually help us think about.
Okay.
What is this plyometric? Is it a box jump? Is it a depth jump? Is it a vertical jump? Do I need them? Will they help? And, with the ground contact times, we're talking about a full landing. We're talking about a half landing, quarter. How much time are we spending on the ground?
Right.
So if we're following the textbook way of looking at this, and we're only going to do 10 reps of full explosive jumps, our ground contact time is going to be a little bit higher, like it's going to be on the ground longer versus like, something like skipping where you're, moving forward, and that's going to be less ground contact time. Then we have, the force output. That's going to be, how hard you're landing. It's going to be, I guess, how hot, like if you're doing one of those tests where you're moving the the marker,
okay.
combine type of testing. And then, there's another quality of plyometrics in general, which is strain on the tissues, right? Like, is this emphasizing a strain on, a tissue? And if you're in a rehab setting, that's a very good question to ask, because if your therapist is giving you, whoa.
I know. I was wondering if that was you or me.
That's me. So your therapist is giving you potentially ways to adjust your body to get used to hard landings, especially if you've been immobile around the joint for too long, like an ankle and knee, right?
Mm-hmm.
In knee rehab, that's a whole nother thing we could get into.
Right.
Yeah. Knee rehab, a lot of jump training and a lot of box jumps are in types of knee strengthening programs. I'm thinking about basketball, I'm thinking about soccer, and, strain on the tissues is a quality of the exercise that can help you or not help you. So that's a whole nother quality to kind of look at. Then we have like another quality, which is like number of repetitions. Is it, this gold standard that I'm trying to give you guys, which is 10? Or is it, more of a CrossFit thought process where it's like 60 in 5 minutes or
as many as possible.
Yikes. And so, those are the kind of things that I would think about if my client asked me if they need this type of training. Those are, that's just the, and then I think we should also mention, another quality of this exercise, which is the depth of the box or the
right.
And so it's the same like a step up, like, how would you advise someone to look at a step up? How high they're supposed to step and all that kind of stuff.
Again, who is the person and
yeah.
What's the goal?
Yeah. So, if our goal for box jumps is for metabolic conditioning, do we want a 30? So then we have time, we have reps, if they're going to do 15 reps, our box can't be too big or high rather. Right.
Yeah. And and also what's interesting is there's many different types of boxes available too. Mm-hmm. Some that are more forgiving than others, should you happen to miss the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's a really, to me, that's the biggest implication, one of the biggest potential risks is like, what happens when you don't make it?
Yeah.
And who are you? And can you sustain whatever comes from that?
Yeah. That has happened to me. And I did sprain a finger. So
oh, really?
That's
I'm sorry. How did you sprain a finger? Like you missed it and it just Oh, geez.
So some of the equipment for box jumps are not boxes at all. Well, they're formed like boxes, but they're soft.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I have a problem with them. This is where I hurt myself.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. So
you can, it's
better.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't know. It just,
was it because it was too squishy, or just like it the way that it moved when you didn't make it, it like created a bigger situation?
I think that could have happened. The shin might have hit it first. That moved it just enough. So fast, right?
Yeah.
And we actually have it on camera.
Oh no.
I was only doing it to film a promo for my course, and which makes
I'm sorry. I'm laughing
funny.
with you.
It is funny because I was trying. I it worked out perfectly, and I think it belonged in the promo because when we're not thinking for ourselves, we can make mistakes, and
Absolutely.
Following someone else's rules, we can make mistakes. And essentially I did that. But anyways, the whole idea here is being able to, I don't know, it's like, if you're going to use these, I would really encourage people, if somebody else is giving you these instructions from afar. They're not giving you personalized instruction on how many or what to do with the box jump. I don't know. I mean, I would absolutely follow like if I'm in a room of athletes, I guess I would follow that room of that standard that we only have enough ATP to do 10 of these explosive one after.
Yeah, like do the best that you can. Don't quality over quantity type of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would always say start low. I mean, you know, and progress. Like if that was easy, great, go up a notch, but like there's no point in starting.
Yeah, I would even start with just they're called tuck jumps, where you kind of start in a squat and you just push yourself up, bring your knees up towards your chest and land.
Yeah.
Similarly in a squat type of position. And you're taking out the box.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing with this. Like, there's so many different variations that could be done without a box.
Yeah.
To even if it's about starting off with, that, and there is a fear factor. I think for some people there's like a building of confidence and a fear factor. And I read something interesting in the NSCA textbook that said that previous recommendations stated that a person's 1 rep max squat should be 1.5 times their body weight before they would start plyometric training.
Okay. So,
which I just think is pretty intense. Like, I mean, that means if I'm 150 pounds, that means my 1 rep max has to be 225 on my squat before I should even consider plyometric training.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it took me a year to get to like a 200-pound squat, to be honest with you, safely. Like,
yeah. And like, I feel like you're an athlete, like and so they said though, that now it's more, they recommend more, like emphasis on technique. Like you might not have to, if you're a child or a younger person or an older person, like you might never achieve that 1 rep max squat. So it would be more important to pay attention. And I could argue that it would be more important to pay attention. Like the squat really in and of itself isn't like like, oh, all of a sudden now you can do 225 or whatever it is. So you'll be fine. You're automatically safe.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't quite carry over. The hip thrusting the hip bending and straightening aspect of it does. But if you're doing these squats and your regular technique is, your heels are always kind of moving around when you're doing your squat, I don't know if that's going to carry over to good quality landings.
Sure.
Yeah.
And right. So that could be a great opportunity to work on cleaning up some performance, like technique issues before you would ever go to jumping. But I just know, like just from dancing, from ballet, like that's a huge part of that is jumping. And I know when I was training for that, like I couldn't have squatted 100 pounds. You know what I mean? Like it's so, I just think it's interesting, like the guidelines that sometimes get put out there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I just think that's an interesting guideline to put out there. I
was surprised to read it, to be honest with you.
Because I think that would, if we just followed that would disqualify a lot of folks from doing that, which also puts throws some shade over to this like functional training aspect of it. And functional training, air quotes, guys, is kind of like a subculture within itself of the fitness industry that emphasizes, what we do in everyday life should be, mimicked in the gym. And, when I went down my YouTube rabbit hole for this, I definitely ran into, quote unquote, functional trainers talking about using box squats to increase like your everyday activities and things like that. So if you use it in that thought process, and then this NSCA, guideline, they're completely on others, different sides of the continuum here. And, so, wow, like I wouldn't know. I would definitely not be on either side of that. Like it's
right.
definitely in
Totally.
the middle. Yeah. And like, for me personally, I don't appreciate goals that are imposed on me. Like, oh, you should be athletic. Yeah. And
yeah, I feel that one deeply.
Yeah. And
just because I don't.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, so much of the research and the things that I'm reading about, it's all about kind of athletic performance. And like you were saying before, that it definitely has a place, or could have a place with the right person in the right situation and the right in therapy and like reaction time is like, those are important things to be training. But like the box jump, it seems like such an aggressive, I mean, I'm seeing people on a more one end of a spectrum, and if I was working more with athletes who are sort of a little bit more sometimes indestructible than, or have a little more, or even like in a different age range generally than a lot of the people that I'm working with, maybe I would see it differently. But I think so much more of the population is in a different space, even if they wanted like, even if they have athletic pursuits, they may still not be in training to be a professional athlete. I think that's a much smaller percentage of the population.
Yeah. So yeah, people, to use these or not, I say we went through a lot of risk assessment right here. That's what you just heard.
It's an intense conversation. Like there's so many different facets and so many different like ways to explore it, which makes it very interesting. Yeah. But also very hard to be like, this is what you should do. And not that we would ever say that, but it's such a unique to each individual's kind of a situation.
Yeah. No, I don't have a lot of go get 'em type of, anecdotes here for you, go get 'em, Tiger.
Right.
Like that, that's actually my advice for the box jump. Go get 'em.
Right. Go get 'em, Tiger.
Go have fun with that. Yeah. Cause it's, cause even in, if I think about where my goals are now,
right.
Which my goals personally are now around, health of my microbiome and exercise. Like I do not have a physique goal. I don't have, a weight goal, anything finite in that way, right. But I do have measurements of this microbiome. We don't have to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah. But the thing is I know that, when we expose ourselves to heat, which this is where plyometrics can come into the conversation about the everyday exercise for, someone who is well conditioned, right? Let's just say conditioned to work out. And because your body builds up heat basically during high intensity exercise, and that's where this box jump could be a possibility for me.
That's very cool.
Yeah. There are probably 60 other ideas I have before I go to a box jump, especially after my finger sprain.
Right. Well, that stays with a person. I want all my fingers. I need them. Well, especially for what you do.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a lot of like how I have in the past determined, like, am I willing to risk something
yeah,
for, my goal, whatever my current goal happens to be.
And I think this like really folds in nicely to the conversation we had a few days ago about being an athlete, or what is an athlete? What is
right. Yeah.
Because the rationale for using box jumps in our training, it sounds like most of it comes back down to sport for me. If you're going to have a strong case for using them, I think there's probably a sport involved.
Yeah. I see. Because it would just be easy enough to take away the box and have a different variation that wouldn't be so potentially injurious.
Yeah. I mean, and if we go back to our first episode, like, frog pumps and peach pumps, if we're talking about like getting a good glute pump, I mean, a little plyometric set right after, doing a contrast, which would be something like a squat or a hip abduction machine where you're biasing the glutes. Take squat out of that. A leg press or a hip abduction machine. And then you have, 20 seconds of explosive type of hip extension motions. I mean, that's, when you talk about a pump, like, that's where I'm going,
Yeah. No. And like, that's the thing too, right? Like I've been thinking about this a lot, like the sensations I really want to return to, like what makes me want to keep training on a regular basis. And it's because I enjoy the sensations, but then there are sensations I do not enjoy. And I don't want to return to them. And if somebody said, well, this is all I have to offer you for exercise, I'd be like, that does not work for me. I don't want, and not even that I wouldn't try, but I'd be like, I just like, that doesn't feel good. I don't want to do that. Cause I love the other sensations so much. It feels so good when it's like appropriately pumpy.
Yes. I love that. Hashtag appropriately pumpy. Oh my God. That might be a thing.
I will totally, be on board with that. Our good friend and colleague, Gigi, did bring up an interesting point that we were talking about the risk and benefit of exercise and the potential, like in CrossFit, like there's it's kind of a thing, like the box bite to get like sort of your shin scraped and that stuff. And my point, cause I was like, oh, well, that doesn't seem like it's worth, and he said, for some people, that really might be though, to be a part of a community, to be kind of like a badge of honor, sort of like an initiation into a community, like that might actually very much be, that worth some shin scrapes.
Yeah. Social status, social currency.
Yeah. Which is fair. If I'm somebody who is healthy enough to recover from that. And, I think that's a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. Like, that makes so much sense. And I think that's a really good little place to leave it based on, that makes All right. Now for something a little bit more juicy. No more rotten peaches. So we, throwing it back, having fun with some nostalgia here. Step aerobics.
I love this topic.
What came to mind when I
So I used to be a big step aerobics fan. I remember, so like Jen Miller had like a Reebok step Reebok, and I would do that in my parents' family room. And when I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, nice.
And so I was actually like looking her up. She comes up in my Legends of Fitness book and what was so interesting to me was, she created it sort of like based, or the story is that because she had an overuse injury. And so she was told by a physical therapist to step up onto a milk crate, which is like, and so she was like, well, this is boring, but then put it to music and created like which there's like a lot to explore there if we wanted to. But what was so interesting is I Googled her and she is still around. And she's just recently developed a new kind of step called the Kush. Which is spelled like marijuana, except there's an extra S. So it's like KUSSH. And it's cushiony. It's a cushiony step, which again, there's a lot that could be unpacked there if one would want to unpack it.
I mean, how cool is like the relevance here of what we just talked about and this?
Yes.
That's so cool.
That's so cool. I didn't even put that together before, but they're both boxes. They're both like, did you do that on purpose? I totally didn't even think about that.
No, I mean, some of the podcast topics come from me being such an extrovert, and this is how I motivate myself, is to say out loud, I'm going to do it. And then I go,
Okay.
like, that's kind of,
I wonder if I try that. Cause I'm so, but I love that. Okay.
I'm so extroverted that's how I motivate myself.
That's smart.
I just claim it. And then I do it.
Figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to be on the podcast. It has to be like,
oh, okay.
for you
somebody
guys.
else has to hear it.
Yeah. For you guys. And then I do it. Yeah.
That's really cool.
So but step aerobics. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind was Reebok. And I did also look up the history of it and found Jenn Miller. And now that I've come back to it as something fun for me, and it's so cool for me as someone who has had multiple knee surgeries and really has created my whole career on kind of solving my own problems, which is early onset arthritis of the knees. So the fact that I can do cardio for my own health and do step aerobics is honestly, it feels so good, you guys. And that is something I consider my own achievement. And, actually before this post, I did a interview with Chris Verdi that created the Core Restore training system. And, he's one of those influential people that has helped me achieve that goal too. So shout out to that episode.
That's very cool.
Then,
what an awesome achievement to
feel
like you can do all of these things that you,
So step aerobics for me is a celebration. It's fun. It's a little bit sweaty. Like I definitely sweat more if I'm measuring like the exercise, right? For, the cardio aspect of it. I sweat more when I run, I sweat more in the sauna, but it includes like a brain puzzle because there's agility involved.
That's
It includes, I would also call it agility for like my ankles. I think that's an interesting aspect to it. The biggest difference now for me is the Reebok step was really high compared to,
Well, and do you have a step right now where you can modify it? Like either different levels or you could sort of like turn the bottoms around and get into different.
I actually have the old step, with the, they look like
different risers or something.
Yeah. With the risers.
Okay.
And, but when I remember using a Reebok step, it's much bigger. Then I only use one riser now. And that suits it's the right amount for me. I don't need to take it a bit higher because I still have clients that blame some of their problems on step in the 90s. They're like, I went too far.
Right. Well, and I will say my last step experience was not a positive one, but it wasn't because I got injured. It was at a crunch here in New York City, like back in, I want to say 19 or probably like 2000, 2001. And in New York City, there are so many dancers and very aware and able people. So the step classes were very like, if you didn't know what you were doing, you were just completely lost. Like, good luck trying to catch up or like look like and I was just standing there watching everybody else. And I was like, I'm never going back and taking this again.
Wow.
So
yeah. So that's one of the advantages of coming back to it is I do it on YouTube.
No, and I love that's a great way to do. Right. So if you don't understand, you can go back and look at the steps again, the choreography. But I like that you said that about the brain puzzle, because it is like, sometimes you get so interested in like remembering where you're supposed to go and what's coming up next. That in a way you kind of forget a little bit that you're like doing this.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And I only need that once a week. I know some people kind of build that into every workout they do. And I'm not necessarily on board with like calling that healthy, but, I am on board for, using just a different tactile, thing for me, and, it helps me mentally as well, because I can be so work oriented when I'm working out.
Okay.
And that can be that can be a problem. So I'm just,
Sure.
I love you guys. I love the podcast, but, some of my workouts aren't fully for me. Sometimes that's what it feels like. So I'm much better at separating than I used to be. Especially when I was in like the strength and conditioning space, but, now the step aerobics is a celebration for me. So, when we think about like the 90s nostalgia, I do think about like that crowded class and, the intensity when I looked back, was a lot of, ego driven kind of, I guess classes, like the whole tempo of it was, driven to, push, push, push. They use a lot of those like types of terms. And, I kind of like this, light dancey approach that the woman I watch on YouTube. And I also saw a version of step aerobics. I will find it. I looked for it last night to send to you. But it is a combination of actual step, like the historical Black colleges, like.
Oh, okay.
It's a combination of that with step aerobics.
That's really cool.
It's fascinating, and they put it on their Instagram all the time. And it's like, when you want to find something, you're like, I can't remember that name.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Yeah.
If you find it though,
I would definitely.
That would be really cool.
Because it's so fun to watch. It's also like in Atlanta. It was one of those places I found it during like COVID. And I was like, oh, like they're just like in it. Like there was a lot of people, and they are all in sync, and it is amazing.
That's so fun. And I love people, that like using what's unique to them to like enjoy exercise. And like you said, like it's a celebration, that's the best kind of exercise, is when it feels happy and celebratory. And
yeah. So maybe that's what I'll do for my, so I'm like 39 and a half, like right now. So maybe that's what this upcoming big birthday will be. It'll be like you have to dress up.
That would be so fun. A step party.
Yeah.
I'm wearing leg warmers and a leotard and a headband, sweatband, and I don't care what anyone says about it.
Maybe that's what this is.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. So, I think that would be fun. Or maybe it's just a party in general. It doesn't have to be a birthday.
Well,
and that's what I kind of look for in step. So, I'm really, happy where we took that. I think, again, like, do you have anything to add?
I thought it was a really interesting conversation. There's so many different directions that could, like, if we really honed in on one specific aspect, I'm sure we could have just done a podcast just on one. So, but I think it was a great, like, overall take on it, and offered a lot of different perspectives and different situations. So, I mean, I feel really good about that.
Yeah. So thank you guys for, if you're here, if you're listening this far, that was, not it sounds so simple just to say box jumps, but it really isn't. And that was a pretty intense conversation. And like Meredith said, there's so many perspectives and variables. And if you have anything in that conversation that you want us to come back to, let us know. That would be awesome. Actually.
That would be so great. Yeah.
And and just to recap, yes, that was a complex conversation about one exercise. There's a lot of literature to look onto this exercise, which is not typical in our field, that one type of exercise has this much research on it. And then secondly, our step aerobics, we're talking, it's a the big box conversation, I guess what this is called. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Be sure to reach out on Instagram so that you can let us know if you want to learn more about something, if you want us to take on a certain topic, and or if you just are enjoying the show and you want to just say hi. I would love that. So Jennifer_Simone_Schwartz on Instagram, and Meredith is Meredith_Mack on Instagram. And of course, you'll find the podcast at thinkfitbefitpodcast.com. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
A special shout out and thank you to our music man, Darren O'Brien of Activity Partners. He composed this just for this awesome show. You can check him out at darrenpatrickobrien.com or click on his website in our show notes. Thanks again. See you next week.